right. Hi, everyone. This is Chelsey from DSM, and I'm here with Ed Plotz, who is the Director of Marketing at Pawlicy. And we've got some cool content information to share. Ed's going to talk a little bit about his specialties and what he does at Pawlicy and what they are. And we hope to just bring you some really good information as we've been doing on these videos. So I'm going to throw it over to Ed and just go with our first question, which is, what is Policy Advisor? And what does your role entail as the Director of Marketing?
Yeah, so Policy Advisor is a pet insurance marketplace. It's kind of like Priceline, but for pet insurance, plus a recommendation algorithm. So it helps guide people through all the nuances of figuring out like, hey, all these plans feel like they're the same. What's the real differences? Or what's the real best one for my specific read and situation? My role then as a marketing director is to really guide us toward a successful investment. We're looking to fundraise and build presence there, but then also building our brand at large. And so some of those things is like defining, can we generate like cost-effective paid acquisition? Can we, let's also then build an asset organically to make sure that we have something that's kind of always rolling in without having to pay for it. And then just getting the name out there and really injecting our name into the conversations that are currently being had around pet insurance.
Yeah, I know I actually didn't know pet insurance existed until I reconnected with you. So my sister, who rescued a dog about 2-3 months ago, I said to her, I said, do you have pet insurance? Like, maybe you should get pet insurance, because she is a dog who happens to have, she has a pit bull, no, not a pit bull, an American Bulldog boxer mix who has very white, thin hair. So he gets like sunburn a lot, and he has really sensitive skin, and he tends to get like itchy and irritated and stuff. So he's like prone to be a high maintenance dog when it comes to cost, just because of the kind of dog that he is. He's very, very sweet. But so yeah, I was like, you should look into pet insurance. Like, I know a great website.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and that's like, realistically, that's probably one of the problems we're trying to solve, is that only 2% of like US pet owners have pet insurance, so it's really kind of an unknown entity. However, it's like massively helpful when it comes in. And part of that battle is trying to reframe the way people think about pet insurance, so that way they understand it's a lot more like car insurance than human health insurance. It's something where you're not necessarily, it's not something that you really want to use. It's really there as like a way to hedge risk.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like great when you have it and really unfortunate when you don't.
Right. Awesome. So I know as the marketing director, you manage a handful of different aspects of the marketing at Pawlicy, including content, PR, PPC, CRO. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about the CRO, the conversion rate optimization items that you work on. So what type of metrics do you look at for, in your industry, in your situation, and how do you improve them, and what are you working on testing for the website, and how do you determine what's most important for you in the website and for progress?
Yeah, so our key areas where we're mostly interested in converting people onto like a further stage would be those initial quote generations. When you go on the website, basically you say, this is my pet and information, and then click generate search or generate new quotes. And then we scan and analyze, all the policies across top providers to do that. But that's a really key stage right there, basically just entering the product funnel. From there, the next really important conversion is to say, click enroll, click to start enrollment. So do people then enter that like miniature purchase flow? And then of course, how many of those people actually convert at the very end and purchase a policy? So yeah, those are the three most important ones. How we go about figuring out how to test them, well, we use our analytics platform Mixpanel. And so we look for discrepancies and variances in user behavior there. We have like a funnel view for each channel, so we can understand, are certain channels dropping off in certain areas, or is there certain patterns across all of the channels where there's a key drop off, or maybe there's not a drop off, maybe it's like there's a particular area that works really well. Can we look at that and see like what else can we extrapolate and get to work well elsewhere? And we also do user testing, like throwing a blank on the name right now, but getting people to basically just like record a session and then run through. Um, I don't think it's Hotjar.
Hotjar does do that type of data recording though,
Right.
but I don't. Yeah, you may be referring to a different tool.
Yeah, exactly. I know Hotjar like does do those recorded sessions, but I think the tool I'm referring to is different in that we're basically proactively asking these people like, what's your opinion on us, and we kind of get that like more like direct user feedback, which has been helpful to understand like, oh, I didn't understand where to go from here, or I didn't realize that that I could actually purchase on your website. I thought it was just a comparison tool. And so those kinds of things are helpful in thinking about where the friction points are.
Yeah, that's huge to have direct, like almost like testimonial feedback
Mm-hmm.
from someone directly. That's very cool. I can imagine that's incredibly helpful, especially because it's technically an e-commerce site. At one point, I guess you can consider it. I mean, it kind of transitions into that if someone's going to purchase a policy. So you do have those different points of like a point of sale at the end. So you do want to know, like, people not knowing that they can actually purchase through you, like a price line is a huge thing to make sure that you highlight. Yeah, that's interesting. So my next question talks about the tools that you use. So you mentioned Mixpanel and analytics. Are there any other, I know you talk about a couple of third-party tools. Are there any other things that you lean on or prefer when it comes to doing CRO testing for the site?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Mixpanel is really solid. For one, it has the ability to create like relatively easily great visualizations of your data in like different ways, and the ability to create one visualization and then it's just like a click away to re-visualize it in a different format is like really helpful to be able to say like, what's my percent change over the last period, and then just like boop, let me just click and then okay, this is a funnel view, or boop, what's like the time decay view. And so it's got some nice things there. It also is nice because if you're paying for that tool, it also comes with the ability to launch like pop-ups or messaging,
Wow.
which obviously is
That's
helpful
cool.
for conversion. We actually handle our remarketing emails through Mixpanel, and have just started testing some modals. So that's all very helpful. Google Analytics is also something that we use, although we generally use that more as like a sense check. And really the most helpful thing that I've found working at Pawlicy Advisor is that our CTO, our engineer product guy is like superb and has a really strong like marketing mindset as well. And
Yeah.
so it's very easy for me to communicate to him and work with him to problem solve different points of friction in our funnel and come up with solutions, and have him just build them out quickly and easily, rather than going to a third-party tool to install another script and have that slightly delay load times or deal with any of that, or another subscription. I can literally have him build anything and everything that we might need, which is very nice.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's always interesting to have different parts, like have a creative person understand marketing, or have your developer, your builder understand marketing, because if there's that disconnect, it's kind of hard to communicate like what needs to get done and why, and there ends up being like that friction of questions in between, if they're trying to get on your page and you're trying to get them on your page, and there's a disconnect. But a lot of our creative team here too has a really good understanding of marketing and why we do things, or like we want it to look a certain way because of this, even though maybe design best practice isn't putting something here, we're going to put it there because there's a purpose. So yeah, that's super important. That's awesome that you have someone on hand like that. Question, is the Mixpanel like reporting aspect not necessarily the like additional messaging and pop-up aspect, but is the reporting aspect similar to how Data Studio works, where you can basically build from scratch and figure out, create any kind of visualization in a way?
I would say Data Studio is more, it's more flexible. You have greater variety and greater options to create the kinds of things that you would want to report on in Data Studio. However, given that, it's also harder to kind of get to where you want to get to quicker.
Okay.
So Mixpanel it doesn't have such great flexibility and all the variances that you can create with your reporting. But because it's not as flexible, the templates are there, and they do have a great set of kinds of like templated styles. So it's easier to get certain reports faster to get to where you need to be. It just might be harder if there was some kind of nuance that you needed that it didn't offer. Then that would be a thing.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That's good to know. Yeah, I haven't really done, or I've never used Mixpanel, haven't done too much like looking into it. So I was curious about that. So that's good information for whoever is looking for like reporting dashboards or creating them, or where to go with those. All right. So next up is, what data and KPIs have you been able to impact at Pawlicy since you started there and you've become their director of marketing? What kind of successes have you had so far?
Yeah. So we've had great success on the SEO front. We're ranking like top page for a lot of like key terms, and some of them are quite competitive.
Nice.
We have been able to establish like a cost-effective CAC on PPC, which is great. And that took some work, but we're there now. And now, to have that as an additional channel of acquisition is excellent. From like a conversion standpoint, we recently actually launched a test that did boost conversion rate by about 50%. And what was interesting with that test was we saw that people who were viewing it, were converting about 50% better. And the next move was, great, now how do we get more people to view it? And so now there's another test in play there to say, like, what if we force people to view this rather than have it as an opt-in type of deal? But yeah, that's really the main. I mean, like, since I've started, back basically the beginning of this year, overall our monthly sales have been up about 200% on a monthly basis. And yeah, and obviously we're starting from like a smaller point of reference. So like all the percentages for like search traffic are like, too high to matter. It's like 600% more search traffic.
Right. Just because everything is up so much that it's just impacted. Yeah. Right. And it's all for the love of pets, which probably makes you happy on a daily basis because you're an animal lover. I mean, that's just a cool bonus to, like, being in an agency when we get a client that's like related to something that I specifically have an interest in. It's just like a little bit more icing on the cake when you can help that client get to where they need to be. So the fact that it's all for the animals is really awesome. So to wrap it up with my last question, if you could recommend one CRO tactic for someone who's brand new to doing any kind of conversion rate optimization, what would it be?
Yeah, I would like, there's not really one go-to. And really, like, the best thing is always to look at your analytics, certainly to figure out, okay, what is that telling me? Get people to go through your website, that like direct user feedback to say, oh, I didn't even realize I was supposed to look at that. Like, that kind of feedback is invaluable. But also, one of my favorite things to do is really just like look at like the big data-driven brands and what they're doing. Groupon is a great one to look at. Look at the things that they do well, and then think, okay, what would that look like if it was like my brand doing that?
Yeah.
Facebook, obviously, they have an immense data set, and they are definitely a data-driven company that uses performance marketing. They have whole like departments on performance marketing. And so, like, how do they handle certain things in product? Airbnb is another one. But look for those like larger companies that have massive data sets, but are also modern enough to be using performance marketing, that growth marketing techniques and conversion optimization at scale, because then they've kind of done the work for you, and there's no sense to really reinvent the wheel. Look to like, okay, if they're doing this, that means that across thousands, millions of hundreds of thousands of people, like, this seems to be like a viable option. Let's start with that and then pivot, as needed for our own brand, rather than trying to think of completely brand new things out of thin air.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And yeah, exactly. It's like, rather than like it's like reading a case study. If Groupon's doing it and clearly it's working, or you found that you've entered their sales funnel because it worked on you, it's probably going to work on your smaller sample size. So that's great advice, especially considering it is much more common to see brands doing all different kinds of CRO tests or email marketing hacks or things like that more than there used to be. I get tons of emails from Wayfair like constantly, the furniture website. Their email marketing is out of control, but at the same time, they totally catch me sometimes where it's so targeted and they retarget very well, and they I don't even know how they do it. They must have so many people, but again, it's like they've proven that it works. So kind of follow the breadcrumbs is definitely good advice there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have like a swipe file myself of basically anytime I personally convert on something, I'm like, okay, well, if it got me, it must be good.
Right.
Uh, Especially because, obviously we worked together at like a prior agency. And so coming from like an agency background where you're just like completely immersed in like marketers trying to market to marketers about marketing, it's like it's just like ridiculous. And you become
Yeah.
numb to a lot of things that might work on other people because you've already seen it a million times before. So when something does work with you, you're like, oh, that's actually new or good. That really stands out. Let's make sure to save that for the swipe file.
Yeah, we talk about that stuff all the time here. Well, like my manager or a teammate will say, "Hey, there was this really cool campaign that totally made me stop and look at it and read it." And I usually avoid those like the plague because I know exactly what they're trying to do.
Right.
Marketers marketing to marketers. So even if it's like another brand, what they did, or um, marketers marketing like knowledge or tools or training stuff, there are some cool things out there. So that's definitely a good thing. If you've become numb to it and then something catches your eye, consider saving that for your back pocket if you have the opportunity to use something like that. Yeah, it's good advice. Awesome. Do you have any last advice or knowledge or thoughts or anything to share before we wrap it up?
Um, I would say also one other bit of advice that I've learned is, which is both helpful from a branding perspective, helpful from an SEO perspective, and helpful from a conversion perspective, especially when you're looking at conversion on like longer sales cycles, like business contracts and such, is to look for opportunities to productize like your information. And so if you think about like my last company I was at, Ladder, we did a really good job at productizing our information. So we would publish blog posts around what tactics worked. Okay, well then we actually created a tactic database, and that was helpful. But then I also was able to productize the newsletter, and I've brought those similar aspects to Policy Advisor, where instead of like nobody wants to sign up for another newsletter. So how can you reframe it? It's like, well, you're going to sign up and you're going to get this thing in your inbox, and just positioning it differently. Use the image of like a mobile phone with what you're getting on the mobile phone. It almost looks like it's an app. Like you're kind of talking about the mobile experience. You're not talking about the newsletter experience. And with Policy Advisor, we've also built out a few directories now where it's like very easy to like search and like basically bringing some of our product pieces to the public without having to go into the product to get them. But yeah, easiest way to think about it is like if you have one website and they're like, we do this thing really well, and then you have another website and they're like, we do this thing really well, and they have a blog that talks about it, you might be leaning toward that one because there's some proof of like they seem like they really know what they're talking about. But now there's a third website that they say we do this really well, they have a blog, and then they also have 2 or 3 products that like help me solve other pain points in that area. Okay, now these guys seem like even more experts because they know this so well that they've generated like these tools that are like quick and easy for me to use. They must know what they're doing.
Right.
So yeah, that the idea of productization I think is just like really helpful from an perceived authority standpoint, which helps conversion in that sense. But also these products are generally like really usable, if you do it right, and that's really helpful for SEO, getting people to stay on your site longer. If it's like a directory style product, then you have a massive amount of pages that could be ranking for like long tail search keywords.
Yeah, that's great kind of general knowledge that anyone can really adapt to. So awesome. Good last tidbit. I liked that. Gonna go have a think on that for us here at our agency now. Well, it was great catching up with you, Ed. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And keep on doing what you're doing. Best of luck at Pawlicy. And hopefully we will talk again soon.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.